So thanks for being with me. This is my company. It's called Post and Boost. This is our company. We call ourselves advertising experts for funeral homes because we have expanded our services. We are now producing television advertising and radio advertising in addition to Facebook, so we're really excited about that. As Matt mentioned, or as Jen mentioned, if you have questions as we go along, just enter them in the chat room. And then Matt will ask those when we get to the end of our session. So let me ask everybody a question. What do you see when you think about the foyer on the screen in your mind? Do you see a picture, the foyer of your funeral home? I know, Kathy, you have a beautiful foyer. What do you see when you think about your main visitation room on the screen in your mind? And here's our last question. What do you see when you think about your chapel on the screen in your mind? Well, the late Dr. William Glasser, he was a celebrated American psychiatrist. He said, we think in pictures and we speak in words. We think in pictures and we speak in words. Well, I don't know about you, but I also think in words. But as I think in words, a lot of the words that I put together create pictures. And so I think it's very valid to remember that we think in pictures. So now in the, we're going to call the Busting the Myths keywords, which is the download that Jen gave you, enter in the first answer. We think in pictures. We think in pictures. Okay. So now, when consumers think about your funeral home, what pictures do they see? Do they see a picture that looks like this? And by the way, this is a real billboard. Plan my funeral now. 10 ridiculous reasons to monkey around and find out how not to. Or do they see a picture like this of a funeral professional who can care for a family? Do they see a picture like this? Here's a Facebook example. Have your cake and eat it too. It's chocolate day. Or do they see a picture like this of a compassionate funeral director in the chapel of their funeral home where a celebration of life can be held? Would they see something like this with a price? Or would they see somebody who can pre-plan a funeral? Or do they see nothing at all? And that would be a marketing bridge mistake. This session is all about busting the myths of local advertising for funeral homes, how to invest your dollars wisely for increased sales. I'm Bill Johnston, and I'm your host, and a lot of the information that we'll be talking about today either comes from my book, How Facebook Works for Funeral Homes, or from my experience in broadcasting and in interactive media. My goal for you today, what I'm going for, is I want to help you understand how to effectively advertise your funeral home so that you can believe your funeral home can effectively advertise on mass media or on Facebook. So we'll be talking about mass media today, and we'll be also talking about Facebook and how to spend your advertising dollars wisely so that you get the most for what you spend. And this is a smaller part of our presentation, and I could go on with this one for hours, but how you spend your advertising dollars wisely, and that will be at the end of our session. Now, I've given you this card, Busting the Myths keywords, and the reason I've given you this card is because, well, my experience has been that usually when you go through a session like this, you'll forget about 95% of what we talk about. So by filling in the blanks as we go along, and then keeping this card and referencing it a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, you'll remember the key things we talked about during today's session. So I highly recommend that you print this out and remember the first answer, and that is we think in pictures. Well, I had some fun with this. What is a myth? And I would define a myth as a commonly believed but false idea. A commonly believed but false idea. Now, these myths, I have 5 of them, and they're in the latest version of my book. These myths are things I've heard from people in the funeral industry. And so I'm repeating them here today, and then hopefully I'm able to bust them up. So myth number one, advertising doesn't work for me. Now, this is not only true for people that I've worked with in the funeral industry, but this is true in all retail advertising. Advertising doesn't work for me. And usually when you hear that, a paragraph or two later, you'll hear, well, word of mouth is our best form of advertising. Well, of course it is. There's no form of advertising that's more powerful than word of mouth advertising. Now, our Facebook customers will be quick to tell you that when people make comments on their post, that is word of mouth advertising as well. But this is one big reason why a lot of firms don't advertise. It's never worked for them. And it could be that what they've done has been ineffective advertising. And what we're going to tell you today and show you today, believe it or not, is effective advertising. I'm going to take 25 years of broadcasting, 10 years of interactive media, and a degree from Syracuse University and compress it into 40 minutes. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to teach you this, the 4 pillars of effective local advertising: reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. And there are 4 pillars, just like there are four legs on a chair. If you had a chair and someone came along and sawed one of those legs off, chair wouldn't work, and neither would your advertising. So you're going to learn the 4 pillars of effective local advertising. But when you think about how advertising works and that advertising can work, well, it works for Coke. It works for Coke, and it works for Geico. I mean, think about this. We didn't even know who the gecko was 20 years ago, and today, one of the most recognizable images in advertising. So if it can work for Coke and it can work for Geico in an area of a radius of 10 miles around your funeral home, it can work for you as well. Here's the second myth. I don't want to appear opportunistic and sound like a vulture. Now, a number of people will not narrate that and will not admit that, but that is an underlying feeling. In fact, when I've spoken on this topic and I discuss this idea, I get a lot of heads going vertically, like, yes, agreeing with me. And here's the thing. There's this company out there, the Good Hands people from Allstate. Here's their ad. Leave love, not stress. What are they contemplating in this ad? Why, they're contemplating that somebody might leave. Somebody might die. Here's a New York Life ad, an insurance policy that fits your budget. What do you need a policy for? What do you need a life insurance policy for? Or a small price to pay to protect your loved ones. Protect them from what? And the answer is protecting from a sudden death or a death. And so if they can advertise, and all these insurance companies can advertise, why, a local, rock-solid funeral home like yours, you should be allowed to advertise too. Myth number 3, everybody knows who we are. Everybody knows we're here. No, they don't. No, they don't. Everybody does not know. I found this. This was an interesting graphic from North American Moving Services. Now, they're interested in people who move. And what's interesting about this is they're saying that about 25% of the people that they polled lived in their city for up to 10 years, which means they're new. They're new. They didn't grow up there. They weren't born there. Close to 18% said 11 to 20 years. And then 21% said 21 to 30 years they lived there. Only 12% said they lived in their hometown from 31 to 35 years, and that number is going down. So what that means is simply this: people move. I mean, they do. And then here's the other doggone thing about advertising that most people are not willing to admit, but it's true. People forget. I know in radio, we always talked about the phrase persuade, inform, and remind. Persuade, inform, and remind. It's all about repetition. Myth number 4, I don't advertise because I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Well, today we're going to give you a few topics that will help you know what to say. And my book, if you have my book, How Facebook Works for Funeral Homes, there are 12 topics in this book that make it easier for you to know what to say. And then the last myth is funeral home advertising is negative and depressing. We learned this a long time ago. Funeral homes, Facebook users, for example, love their funeral homes. And it's one of those things where if you've never been served by a funeral home, you wouldn't know what you're talking about. But if you have been served by a compassionate and caring funeral professional, funeral home advertising is not negative and it's not depressing. I can point to our latest post for Green Hills Funeral Home. This is a new client of ours, and they're based in Middlesboro, Kentucky. Now, this is a competitive market. These guys opened their business about 10 years ago, and they do maybe 120 to 130 calls a year. And they're in what's called the tri-state area. So they actually serve families who live in 3 different states. Talk about complicated. This was the first post that we did for them, which was 2 weeks ago yesterday. Look at this. 360 this, and I took these images the day after we posted this ad. 363 people liked or loved this post. And here's what the comments were saying. Louise said, absolutely the best. Betty said, thanks for helping my family through more than one. Amy said, the best. I'll never forget how well they cared for my dad. And then Regina said, cannot say enough wonderful things about this couple. These are word of mouth ads. And actually, from a comment standpoint, over 100 comments for this firm. So is it negative advertising your services? Heck no. So now this piece here, I'm excited to show you this to you. And this is a secret, how advertising works. I have a degree in radio and television at Syracuse. It's one of the most prestigious communication school in America. I spent 23 years in broadcasting. It wasn't until the last 2 that the owner of our firm, the largest privately held broadcaster in America, taught me this, the 4 pillars of effective local advertising. And ever since I learned this, my last 2 years in radio, I could get results from my clients. And I'm going to tell you, in the radio business, getting results for clients is really challenging. So, but I figured it out because I use this system. And for our post and boost customers and for our cable television customers, this approach we have found to be very effective. So it's all based on 4 things: reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. Reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. Write that down. The 4 pillars of effective local advertising are reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. This is 1 year of advertising school condensed in 4 minutes. So reach, think about reach. Reach. So with reach, how many people do you need to reach to expand your business? How many people does your advertising need to reach on a monthly basis? And we can begin by looking at what do you say? If we're talking about copy, what do you say in an ad? And again, my book, we have topics in our book. And so I'm going to reveal this little piece, this little nugget for you. I spent about 6 months writing many ads for funeral on Facebook, and it was hard. It just took a long time. But what I did about half a year into it is I printed out all the ads that I'd ever written, cut them up into little pieces, and then put them in little stacks or silos. And what I saw was some stacks talked about funeral directors, some talked about pre-planning, some talked about a beautiful funeral home. So they revealed topics, and what I figured out and what I'm revealing to you today is when you know the topic that you're writing on, it's easier to create copy or to write an ad. It's a whole lot easier. So write that down in your keyword section. Knowing the copy, C-O-P-Y, knowing the topic makes it easier to write advertising copy. So here's the topic: funeral director branding. Funeral director branding. Now, if somebody came to you and said, write an ad for your funeral home, it would be hard to do. Because again, some people think, well, I'm only going to write one ad and I've got to include all these things. But if somebody came to you and said, write an ad about a funeral director, that should be easier. Why? Well, who knows more about being a funeral director than a funeral director? And so we see these types of ads can be very effective. So here's a funeral director branding ad. And what I'm going to attempt to do, and Matt and Jen, you tell me if it's working out okay. Here's a television ad that we produced. Now, this TV ad is not about a funeral director who's alive, but it's branding a funeral director at Lau Funeral.
The biggest thing my father taught me was family first. As president of Lau Funeral Home and Crematory, Jim Lau made sure everyone who worked here felt the same way. It also meant the families we were serving, well, they came first too. I'm Jimmy Ann Lau. I'm proud to be a fourth-generation family member and a funeral director that, just like my dad, puts families first. Lau Funeral Home and Crematory, Alamance County's oldest family-owned funeral home.
That's an awesome ad. That's branding a funeral director. Branding a funeral director. So here's a written ad. When surviving family members embrace the funeral process, they can begin to see a glimmer of hope. Hope the hurting will soften and hope the healing will begin. That's what funeral directors like Andy Huffine help families to see. Funeral directors give families hope. Branding assistance is the same idea. This is probably more important on Facebook. A lot of times your assistants are just as popular as your key staff members. And so even like you have retired members of the community who work for you, office administrators who deal with families after the fact, and then therapy dogs. They're unbelievably popular. So here's more copy. The moment the immediate family realizes they're with their loved one for the last time, someone has to be there and someone has to care. At Fair Funeral Home, that's someone like Assistant Funeral Director Charles Fair. Assistants care. How hard is that to say that? Funeral assistants care. Pre-planning. We use graphics on pre-planning, and it's always amazing to me when you talk to somebody who buys advertising for pre-planning. Some firms have more success than others, but it's always amazing. We advertise for pre-planning, and guess what? We get pre-planning. Here's a radio concept. Have you ever had a surprise party thrown for you? This is Bill Johnston, a funeral director for Johnston Funeral Service. If your family and friends kept their secret a secret, you had a party that you'll never forget. Remember how it felt? That you had absolutely no idea it was going to happen? At Johnston Funeral Service, family members describing a sudden death will say the same thing. That they had absolutely no idea it was going to happen. And when they're asked to make decisions about the funeral, they struggle. That's because they had never thought about it before. Now, pre-planning a funeral won't stop something from happening, but surviving family members will find it easier to get through a difficult time. To pre-plan a funeral, call us or come see us at Johnston Funeral Service, 9602 Casey Court, Daphne, or online at johnstonfuneralservice.com. There you go, pre-planning ad. Even when it's expected, death has a way of surprising us. Pre-planning brings clarity to the funeral process so that when it's time to celebrate a life, there are no surprises. That's a big benefit of pre-planning. It would be easy to figure out. The benefits of being family-owned. We work with Forbes and Dick in Greensboro, North Carolina. Very proud of their family-owned heritage. Here's an ad for them.
Since my family has been serving Greensboro and Guilford County for 5 generations, compassion is at the core of everything we do. I'm Patrick Forbes. When a loved one dies, you want and need the kind of compassion you get from family. It's because we're locally owned we can offer that extra layer of care families who call on us have come to expect. That's why during your time of need, your family becomes part of our family at Forbes and Dick.
I love that phrase, your family becomes part of ours. Ben Falk taught me that in radio 10 years ago. Cremation services, this is an evolving topic. A lot of consumers don't realize that they have options when it comes to how cremation works. Traditional cremations is a new positioning statement. Traditional cremation means that the sights and sounds are the same. It's just that there's no graveside service. Those funeral homes that have on-site crematories, they use this positioning statement, your loved one never leaves our care. And then, of course, for pet cremations, it's a strategy to grow a customer base. Your facility, people may have seen the outside, they may have never seen the inside. Obviously, those images are important when somebody is thinking about where they're going to celebrate a life. This part of our session I'm really excited about. It's called The Consumer's Journey to Purchasing Funeral Services. Now, we think in pictures, and because we think in pictures, I'm going to give you a picture that you can visualize how the consumer's journey to purchasing funeral services, what it looks like. So this is the sales funnel, and if any of you've seen Elton Hong do a presentation for Ring Ring, he'll use something very similar to this. And so if you can imagine a funnel where you pour something into the top of the funnel and a small amount comes out of the bottom, these are the 4 phases that a consumer may go through as they are on their journey to purchasing funeral services. So the story that I tell, and this is something that happened, we did our presentation last week in New York State, and I asked this question: did anybody in the room buy a car in the last year that they dreamed about owning and spent time dreaming about it, went to bed dreaming about it, woke up dreaming about it? Did anybody have that happen to them? And I had one person in the room raise their hand and said, yes, they were dreaming about buying a red Mercedes. And so I asked this person about buying that car, about how did they go to bed thinking about it, waking up thinking about it, and they were thinking about that car all the time. Well, the phenomenon that occurs when this happens to people sometimes is this, is that they see a dream car everywhere. It just seems like that car is at the funeral home, it's at the grocery store, it's traveling from one town to the next. You see that car everywhere. Why? Well, the answer is the power of your subconscious mind. The power of your subconscious mind. And here's the thing about the power of your subconscious mind. It's dedicated to doing 2 things for you. The first thing is keeping you alive, keeping you breathing, keeping your temperature at 98.7 degrees. But the other thing that your subconscious mind does that most people don't know, in fact, most people don't know they have one, is that their subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into their life what they think about most of the time. So here on your keywords card, write this down. Your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you're thinking about most of the time. Now, I talked to this person in New York State. They did buy that red Mercedes. And what happened is their subconscious mind was dedicated to bringing that car into their lives, which means that's the reason they kept seeing it all the time. And so if you think about the power of the subconscious mind, Forbes did a great article about how the subconscious mind works. And they had this great metaphor. Forbes said if the subconscious mind was a Ferrari, the conscious mind was about as powerful as a skateboard. Now, that's a pretty big difference, but it's true. And again, most people don't know how their subconscious mind works. But according to Psychology Today, imagine for a moment that your subconscious mind is like a giant filing cabinet, and it is, where you'll conveniently forget just about everything we covered today. The images that we're using and the words that we're using, the pictures that we're creating, they will go into that file cabinet. So here's Psychology Today says, repeatedly being exposed to radio ads, TV ads, we'll put Facebook ads in there, with key messaging could influence decisions towards the advertised product or service. Imagine that, advertising actually being effective. So the awareness part, someone's in the awareness part of the funnel, the biggest part of the funnel. If you are advertising to them, will a consumer consciously read or remember your ads? And think about it like this. The average consumer sees anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to as many as 6,000 advertising ideas a day. Will they remember the one that they saw from you this week? Well, if they know you or they've been to your funeral home, yes, probably so. But the answer is they're not going to consciously read or remember your ads. But what you're doing in that process is you're establishing an equity position in the mind of the consumer, an equity position in the mind of the consumer. And essentially what that means is you're putting those images, you're putting those pictures in that consumer's filing cabinet. When a consumer enters the interest phase of the funnel, it's still pretty much they are still pretty much going to interact with your advertising the way they have in the past in the awareness part. The only difference is somebody who is interested, maybe something happened to a friend, a relative of a friend, or maybe they went to a funeral or to a wake, or maybe they got a little bit older and that thought crossed their mind. It's when they get to the desire phase, that's when things change. A consumer is going to enter the desire phase when something is going to happen, either to them or somebody who is incredibly close to them. And so what that happens in the desire phase is all of a sudden, imagine if somebody came to you and said, you have 6 to 9 months to live. What will be the foremost thing that you think about most of the time? And the answer will be the consequence of that possibly happening. And so therefore, because your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you think about most of the time, now all those ads that you have been running while you're establishing the equity position in their mind, all those ads, they are now paying attention to consciously. Just like the red car, just like the dream car, they're paying attention to all those ads. And they may perceptually think that this is the first time they've seen these pictures, but the reality is, for some reason, those images look familiar to them because they've seen them before. So we'll go back and ask this question that we started the seminar with. When consumers think about your funeral home, what pictures do they see? And of course, when the action time comes, that is when we hope that they will call us. So if your advertising is reaching 10 to 25,000 consumers 4 to 6 times per month, what will they do when it's time to take action? Will they go to Google and search on funeral home? You know, there's a lot of weight put on Google AdWords and advertising on Google and making sure you come up in a ranked search. But is that what you want? You want to be found in a Google search, or do you want them to be searching for your funeral home? And that is a benefit of consistently and effectively advertising. Well, I promise you I do some parts on Facebook, and we want to talk about Facebook because Facebook is also a very effective way to advertise locally. And in this part of our session, we're talking about effective local advertising designed to expand your visibility in your community, expand the reputation of your brand, and hopefully expand your business. And so on your keywords list, I want you to write that down. I want you to write this down rather. Facebook reaches 70% of your local market. It is the biggest media in your market. There's no TV station, radio station, cable channel bigger in your community than Facebook. So what is Facebook? It's funny when I talk about what is Facebook, somebody will say, well, it's social media. And when they say that, I'll ask the question, well, what's social media? And then it gets confusing because social media is hard to define. So at the end of this piece, I'm going to have you defining what Facebook is using 2 words. To help you understand what Facebook is, I'm going to show you this graph. This is the newspaper advertising revenue graph. And it shows you that in the year 2000, the newspaper sold more advertising than it ever did ever. $67 billion in advertising sales. It was way bigger than television, way bigger than radio. It was just the biggest doggone media. And the newspaper was big. And do you remember how big it was when you got your picture in the paper? I do. This is my picture. This picture is 56 years old. But when this picture came out in the paper, everybody at my school saw it. Everybody that knows my parents saw it. Why? Well, the newspaper. Everybody got it. And remember how big the newspaper was, how wide the newspaper was, and how thick it was. In some markets, the newspaper came twice a day. It's why we recycle. We didn't start recycling because it was good for the earth. We started recycling because that stack of newspapers in the garage, well, it was obscene to throw away. And the newspaper industry thought it'd be a really good idea to sell people on recycling. And of course, in the newspaper during these times, the obituary column was one of the, if not the most read page in the newspaper. Why? Why? And the answer is obituaries represent powerful local news. And I can tell you when I get asked this question all the time, should we post obituaries on Facebook? I mean, if it worked for the newspaper, why would it not work for you? But the other thing about the obituary column, besides it being powerful local news, it was a daily market survey. The biggest firms got the most ink, the most inches, and therefore it was a visual reminder to consumers who the big funeral homes were and who the smaller firms were. Maybe they didn't even have an obituary at all. Maybe they just had one column inch with a small little display ad. But this daily market survey not only was a market survey in terms of how it was received by a consumer, it was an ad. It was an advertisement. But because this is gone, because the newspaper is gone, because the obituary column is gone, then it's a problem for those businesses that relied on this forever to know what to do next. What happened? What happened? Well, in the year 2006, Facebook was launched for anyone over the age of 13 with an email address. And the next year, the iPhone was declared to be the invention of the year. It probably should be the invention of the century. Because look at what happened to the newspaper industry around the time that both these ideas came out. Their sales plummeted. And the reason their sales plummeted was because readers were leaving them. Readers were leaving them and going to Facebook and other things. So Facebook is the winner or the recipient of those newspaper readers. And so how we can define Facebook is the newspaper. It's the newspaper. And so what we do when we talk about Facebook, it's all about how to be known, trusted, and celebrated. There's Kathy on Facebook, how to be known, trusted, and celebrated on Facebook. Paula Lau was my second client, and I asked a lot of questions when I started working in the funeral industry to try to figure out what to say in our ads. And when I asked Jim Lau, her husband, what made his firm unique, without any hesitation, he said it was his people. His people made his funeral home unique. And so I started taking pictures of people standing in foyers, standing next to lecterns, people in visitation rooms, in chapels. And where Paula and I were concerned about, are our topics kind of depressing? In other words, we had done 2 months of ads about death and the funeral process with these pictures. We started to think about, should we engage the concept of deathless topics? And so last week when we presented in New York, we showed a few deathless topic examples. National Spumoni Day. How about that? Here's a way, and here's the thing about these types of ads. Internet Self-Care Day. You know, you've cared for people all year. Now is the chance for you to go to the internet and care for yourself. You see, these types of ads, people will say, oh, it keeps our name out there and makes us relevant in the Facebook newsfeed. Well, I can tell you, 25 years in broadcasting, we sold zillions of packages that would keep your name out there. And I can define those packages with one benefit, and that is money moving from an advertiser's checking account into the radio station checking account. I don't know how it benefits to keep your name out there, especially when you're associating yourself with something like the day that cats dread all year, National Take Your Cat to the Vet Day. Well, we figured out, it was about a 2-month study, and while we were posting and boosting, we learned something from Facebook readers. And what they told us was they liked our posts, they loved our post, and they made comments. So what did they say? They were praising individual staff members, they were expressing gratitude for services provided, and they were just doggone thankful that they were there. So this is the big thing we learned. This was our aha moment 6 years ago. Facebook users love their funeral home. And because we figured that out, use pictures of faces on Facebook. Now, how hard is that? It's not that hard. It's not that hard. So boosting posts is what I call the quiet storm of Facebook advertising. What I mean by that is if you are buying television ads or radio ads or billboards or even newspaper ads, your competitors will know what you're doing and can respond in kind. But if you're buying Facebook advertising to grow your business, for example, we've got a new client in New York State that they have a very competitive market, and he's going to quietly buy advertising on Facebook. His competitors will not know what he's doing. It is the quiet storm. So write that down in your Busting the Myths keyword list. You create a quiet storm when you boost your posts on Facebook. Boost. And this is what I love about using faces on Facebook. This is Ann Williams. She owns Coleman Heritage in Coleman, Alabama. And Ann described a situation 2 weeks ago where a man walked into her funeral home and bought a pre-planned policy. And he didn't know her and she didn't know him. But when Ann asked him why he came to her funeral home, he said, "I see you on Facebook all the time." But we thank each and every one of you for participating, and we'll be doing this monthly now forever. Now, these two topics will be our core topics. So the next time that we do this will be on Tuesday, September 26th. You will all receive plenty of invitations and awareness of this. But this is the session that we did in New York State last month, how to be known, trusted, and celebrated on Facebook. And again, this piece on how we think in pictures is a prominent part of this presentation. And of course, we learn through repetition. So we invite you to participate in that. And if you have questions or you want to meet with me, please reach out to me. You can let me know in the chat or go to our website at postandboost.com, and we'd love to help you out in any way that we can.